The Father's Justice. My name is Victor Hayes, and the day I came home early, I wished the house had been empty, because an empty house would have meant nothing was wrong. But what I walked into felt like something had already gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. I wasn't supposed to be there that day. My conference had ended sooner than expected, some last-minute cancellation that should have felt like a small stroke of luck. So I booked the earliest flight back without calling ahead, no texts, no warning, just the quiet idea of surprising my wife. Caroline had always liked those small, unexpected moments. Dinner without distractions, a normal evening that didn't feel rushed or scheduled. But the moment I turned onto our street, something shifted. It wasn't obvious, not something you could point at and explain, more like a pressure in the air, a subtle weight that didn't belong. After more than 2 decades of marriage, you learn the rhythm of a life, the sounds, the patterns, the invisible structure holding everything together. And when something is off, you don't see it first, you feel it. Then I saw the car, Ethan's car, sitting in my driveway on a weekday afternoon, parked like it had every right to be there. That didn't make sense. My son didn't visit without notice, not anymore. Not since he moved out, not since his life became something separate from mine. Scheduled visits, short calls, that was the rhythm now. Said, predictable, distant. I sat there for a second longer than I should have, staring at that car as it might explain itself, like there was a version of reality where this was normal. There wasn't. I stepped out anyway. The air felt still, too still, like the house was holding its breath. And then I noticed the silence. Not the quiet of an empty home, not the calm kind. This was something heavier, something that pressed against your chest, the kind of silence that doesn't welcome you. It warns you. I opened the front door slowly, and the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. Not in a vague way, not in a maybe I'm overthinking way, but in a way that settled deep in your gut and refused to move. Because some instincts don't come from fear, they come from recognition. And in that moment, standing in my own home, I realized something I couldn't yet explain. I hadn't come home early. I had walked into something that was already in motion, something that didn't expect me to be there. And whatever it was, it had already begun. Ethan and Olivia were sitting in the living room, side by side, perfectly still, not watching anything, not scrolling, not even talking, just sitting there, like 2 people waiting for news they had already accepted. And that was the first thing that truly unsettled me. Because normal people react. They look up, they ask questions, they show surprise. But Ethan didn't. He looked at me the way you look at something you were expecting. Not something that interrupted your day, not something that changed the moment. Just a slow blink, controlled, measured. Come. No, Dad. What are you doing here? No confusion. No shift in posture. Nothing. After everything I had taught him, after everything I thought I knew about my own son, that absence of reaction felt louder than any words he could have said. I stood there for a second, longer than necessary, trying to process what I was seeing, trying to give him time to correct it, to act normal, to fix whatever this feeling was. But he didn't. And then Olivia smiled. Not a warm smile, not the polite kind people use to fill an awkward silence. This one didn't belong in that room. It came too quickly, too easily, like it had been prepared in advance. And there was something about it that made my skin tighten, because it wasn't connected to anything happening in the moment. It was disconnected, out of place, almost rehearsed. I had seen Olivia smile 100 times before, at dinners, holidays, birthdays, but never like that. When nothing had been said, never when something was clearly wrong. That smile didn't respond to the moment. It ignored it. And that's when the silence changed. It stopped feeling empty and started feeling intentional, like something had already happened, something they both understood, something I hadn't been allowed to see yet. I set my bag down slowly, not because I was tired, but because I needed a second to think, to observe, to let the room speak without anyone interrupting it. "Ethan," I said finally, keeping my voice even steady, controlled. "What's going on?" He cleared his throat. A small movement, but just enough to break the stillness. "Dad, hey, we were actually just about to call you. Were you?" The words didn't come out as a question. They came out flat, almost automatic. Because nothing about this felt like something that had just happened. This felt like something that had already been decided. I watched his eyes for a reaction, for anything real, anything unplanned. But what I saw instead was hesitation. Not confusion. Not shock. Calculation. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not panic. Not anger. Something colder. Because I had spent enough years around people to understand one simple truth. When someone doesn't react to something unexpected, it's usually because it wasn't unexpected to them. And that realization didn't come with noise. It came quietly, settling into place, piece by piece, until one thought formed clearly in my mind. Whatever had happened in this house, Ethan and Olivia already knew how it ended. "Where's your mother?" The question left my mouth before I even realized I was asking it, not out of curiosity, but out of instinct, like something inside me already knew the answer wasn't going to be simple. Ethan shifted slightly, just enough to break whatever stillness he had been holding on to. "Dad, Mom had an episode this morning," he said, his voice careful, measured. "She's at the hospital, ICU, but they said she's stable." "ICU." That was the only word that stayed with me. Everything else, the explanation, the tone, the attempt to soften it, none of it mattered. ICU doesn't come with comfort. It doesn't come with small problems. It doesn't come with normal days. It comes with machines, with urgency, with the kind of silence that lives between life and something else. I didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I was already turning, already heading for the door, already reaching for my keys, like they had been waiting in my hand the entire time. I don't remember leaving the house. I don't remember closing the door. I just remember being in the car, engine running, hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. And for a second, just a second, everything slowed down. Not around me. Inside me, because panic doesn't always look like chaos. Sometimes it looks like focus. Sharp, narrow, controlled. The kind of focus that blocks out everything except the one thing that matters. Getting there, I started the car and pulled out faster than I should have. Not reckless, but not careful either. Just precise, like every second had weight to it. The road felt shorter than usual. Or maybe I just stopped noticing it. Traffic lights, turns, intersections, they blurred into something automatic, something my body handled without asking permission. My mind stayed fixed on one image. Caroline, not as she was now, because I didn't know that yet, but as she had always been. Strong, sharp, impossible to ignore. The kind of woman who filled a room without trying. And now, she was in an ICU bed. That contrast didn't make sense. It refused to settle. I tightened my grip on the wheel again, forcing my thoughts back into something usable, something controlled. Because losing control wouldn't help her. And that was the only thing that mattered. By the time I pulled into the hospital parking lot, my heartbeat had slowed, not because I was calm, but because I had pushed everything else aside. Fear could wait. Questions could wait. Even anger could wait. What mattered was getting to her, seeing her, understanding what had happened. I stepped out of the car and headed toward the entrance without hesitation. No rushing, no hesitation, just steady movement, one step after another. Because whatever was waiting for me inside, I was going to face it, and I was going to understand it, no matter what it took. Dr. Rebecca Lawson met me just outside the ICU, composed, steady, the kind of presence that doesn't waste words. "Mr. Hayes," she said quietly, I'm glad you're here. There was something in her tone. Not urgent, not panicked, but deliberate, like she had already decided how much truth I could handle in one moment. How is she? I asked. The question felt smaller than it should have, like it didn't belong to the situation I had just walked into. She's stable for now, Dr. Lawson replied. We've managed to control the immediate symptoms, but there are some findings we need to discuss. Findings. That word carried weight. What kind of findings? I asked, keeping my voice even controlled. She held my gaze for a second longer, measuring, then continued. Your wife was admitted with severe disorientation, organ stress, and elevated toxicity markers in her blood. Toxicity? The word landed quietly, but it didn't stay that way. Toxicity, I repeated, slower this time, making sure I had heard it correctly. Yes, she said. We ran a full panel, and what we're seeing isn't consistent with a sudden illness. Not sudden. That meant time. That meant duration. That meant something had been happening long before this morning. Dr. Lawson continued, carefully choosing each word. The levels suggest prolonged exposure, something that has been building, gradually, over time. Building. That word didn't just explain. It implied, because things don't build on their own. Not like this. Not inside someone's body. I felt my hand tighten slightly against the edge of the counter beside me, grounding myself, holding the moment in place, so it wouldn't slip into something uncontrolled. Are you telling me, I said slowly, that this didn't just happen? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she adjusted her stance slightly, as if aligning herself with the weight of what she was about to confirm. I'm telling you, she said, that we need to understand the source of that exposure, and we need to understand it quickly. Source. That was the word that changed everything, because a source meant origin, and origin meant intent. I nodded once, not because I understood everything, but because I understood enough. Enough to know this wasn't random. Enough to know this wasn't just bad luck or an undiagnosed condition finally surfacing. Something had been introduced. Something had been repeated. Something had been allowed to continue, day after day, without interruption. And suddenly, the timeline in my head began to shift. Weeks, maybe months, moments that had seemed ordinary, routines that had gone unquestioned. All of it now felt like part of something else, something I hadn't seen, or maybe something I hadn't wanted to see. I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice steady, even as the realization settled deeper. If this was deliberate, I said, how would something like this be administered? Dr. Lawson paused, just briefly, then answered, with clinical clarity. It could be introduced through food, through liquids, or through supplements, particularly those in powder form, something that dissolves easily, something that doesn't have a strong taste. Supplements. The word didn't echo. It landed. Direct, precise, undeniable. And in that instant, something connected. Not fully, not yet, but enough to form the first real shape of suspicion. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about what had happened to Caroline. It was about who had been close enough, consistent enough, trusted enough, to make something like this possible. The word supplements didn't echo, it settled. Not as a possibility, but as a memory. Because suddenly, I could see it. Mornings, quiet, ordinary, predictable. Olivia standing in our kitchen, moving as she belonged there, opening cabinets, pouring water, setting things out with practiced ease. It had started a few months ago, after Caroline twisted her ankle on the stairs. Nothing serious, just enough to slow her down, just enough to make help seem reasonable. Ethan had suggested it first, casually, almost thoughtfully. Olivia can stop by in the mornings, make sure Mom eats, takes her vitamins. At the time, I had appreciated it. I had even told Marcus that maybe I had misjudged him, that maybe he was finally stepping into something responsible. Every morning. That was the detail I hadn't questioned. Consistency, routine, trust. The exact conditions something like this would require. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not panic. Not yet. Recognition. Because Dr. Lawson hadn't described something sudden. She had described something that built, slowly, deliberately. And Olivia had been there, every morning, without fail. Olivia, carrying the one thing no one ever questions, care. I turned and walked back toward the waiting area. Ethan was standing near the vending machines, arms crossed, posture controlled, like he had already decided how this conversation was going to go. Olivia sat nearby, her phone face down in her lap. That alone was enough to register. She was never without it, never disconnected, never still. But now it was turned over, hidden, as if whatever had already passed through it wasn't meant for me to see. I stopped a few feet in front of them, not rushing, not hesitating, just standing, letting the silence do what it had been doing since I walked in. "Walk me through it," I said finally, my voice even measured. "Everything." Ethan exhaled slowly, like he had been preparing for that exact question. "Mom's been having issues for a while," he said. "We were just trying to help." Help. The word felt thin. "Olivia's been coming by every morning," he continued, "making sure she eats, takes her vitamins." Vitamins. There it was again. I let a small pause settle between us, just long enough for the word to hang in the air. "Which ones?" I asked. Ethan blinked, just once, but it was enough. "What?" he said. "Which vitamins?" I repeated, quieter this time, but sharper. "3 different supplements, right. What are their names?" Lect. His eyes shifted, not away from me, but sideways, toward Olivia. And Olivia didn't answer. She didn't look up. She didn't correct him, didn't fill in the gap, didn't do anything someone innocent would instinctively do. She stayed still, looking down at her lap, like the answer was somewhere she couldn't reach. That silence lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it was enough. Because truth doesn't need time. It reveals itself in hesitation, in what isn't said, where people look when they should be speaking. I straightened slightly, feeling something settle into place. Not certainty, but direction. "Go home," I said calmly. "Anything." Ethan frowned, just slightly, trying to recover. "Dad, we should go home," I repeated, this time without raising my voice. And something in my expression must have made it clear, because he stopped. No argument, no insistence, just compliance. I watched them leave without another word, and as the doors closed behind them, the silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one had shape, because now, for the first time, I wasn't just asking what had happened to my wife. I was starting to understand who might have done it. I didn't go back into the ICU right away, not because I didn't want to see Caroline, but because something else had already started to take shape, something that needed to be confirmed before it slipped away. I sat down in the corner of the waiting area, pulled out my phone, and opened our accounts. Not out of habit, not out of routine, out of instinct. Because when something doesn't make sense on the surface, you look for what's been moving underneath. At first, everything looked normal. Balances, transactions, the usual pattern of a life that had been stable for years. Bills paid, groceries, utilities. Nothing that would raise a flag if you weren't looking for one. But I wasn't looking casually. I was looking carefully, line by line, entry by entry. And that's when I saw it. A withdrawal. Small, barely noticeable. $200. It could have been anything. An errand, a one-time expense, something easily explained. But then there was another one. $350. A few days later, then another, and another. Not large enough to trigger concern. Not large enough to stand out. but consistent, regular, deliberate. I leaned back slightly, narrowing my focus, scrolling further, going back weeks, then months. The pattern didn't break. It repeated, again and again, different amounts, same behavior, always just small enough, always just spaced enough to disappear into the noise, unless you were looking for it. And now I was. I added them up, not mentally, not approximately, precisely, because precision matters when something is trying to hide. The total sat there on the screen, uncomfortable, unavoidable, a number that didn't belong. Not to us, not to the life we had built. I exhaled slowly, then reached for the one person I trusted to see this clearly. Marcus Doyle. He picked up before the second ring. "Victor, I need you to look at something," I said, keeping my voice steady, controlled. I walked him through it, the withdrawals, the pattern, the timing. There was a pause on the other end. Not confusion. Analysis. Then Marcus spoke. "That's not random." I didn't respond, because I already knew that. "That's structured," he continued. "Whoever did this knew exactly how to stay under the radar. Small amounts, spaced out, no spikes, no alerts. Planned." The word didn't need to be said. It was already there. I looked back at the screen, at the quiet trail of numbers that had gone unnoticed for months. "This isn't someone reacting," Marcus added. "This is someone thinking ahead." I closed my eyes for a brief moment, not out of doubt, but because the implications were starting to settle. "This came from the joint account," I said. "The one Ethan had limited access to." Silence. Then Marcus exhaled, slower this time. "Victor," he said carefully, "you need to stop assuming this is a coincidence." I didn't answer, because I wasn't assuming anything anymore. I ended the call and lowered the phone slightly, staring at the numbers one last time. Each transaction, small on its own, insignificant in isolation. But together, they told a story, not of desperation, but of patience, of control, of someone who had taken the time to do this right. And that realization didn't come with anger. It came with clarity, because whatever had been done to Caroline wasn't sudden, wasn't careless. And now, it was clear. It wasn't the only thing that had been happening. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, but because there was nothing left in me that wanted to rest. When something starts to come together, when pieces that didn't belong begin to align, sleep becomes irrelevant. I stayed in that chair, watching the door to Caroline's room, listening to the quiet rhythm of machines behind it, and waiting for something that would turn suspicion into certainty. It came the next morning. My phone buzzed once, and I already knew it was Marcus. I answered before it could ring again. "Victor," he said, no greeting, no pause. "You need to hear this carefully." I didn't sit down. I didn't move. "Tell me." There was a brief silence on his end, not hesitation, preparation. "I spoke to an estate attorney this morning," he continued. "Caroline met with them a few weeks ago, alone. Alone. That fit. Caroline didn't do things halfway, and she didn't announce surprises before they were ready. She updated her life insurance policy," Marcus said. "And Victor, it's not a small one." "How much?" I asked. $2.3 million. The number didn't shock me, not because it was small, but because Caroline had always been meticulous, careful, forward-thinking. What mattered wasn't the amount. It was what came next. "There's more," Marcus added, his voice tightening slightly. "She changed the beneficiaries." I felt something in my chest shift, not violently, but definitively. "Explain." "Ethan was listed before. Standard setup," Marcus said. "But she removed him." Removed. The word didn't echo. It settled. "Completely," he continued. "He's no longer tied to the policy at all." I didn't ask the next question. I already knew there had to be a reason. "Where did it go?" I said. To a charitable trust, Marcus replied. Something she's been building quietly for over a year. That sounded like Caroline. Deliberate, thoughtful, purposeful. She hadn't finalized everything yet, Marcus added. There was still a processing window, about 30 days. 30 days. I closed my eyes for a moment, because suddenly, the timeline wasn't abstract anymore. It was precise, structured, measurable. How much time was left? I asked. Less than a month, he said. And that's when it connected. Not gradually, not piece by piece. All at once. The withdrawals, the mornings, the supplements, the silence, Ethan's lack of reaction, Olivia's smile, all of it snapped into place. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about losing access to it. $2.3 million. Gone. Redirected. Removed. And instead of accepting that, instead of questioning it, confronting it, talking about it, they had done something else. Something quieter. Something patient. Something that required time. I exhaled slowly, forcing my voice to stay steady. He knew, I said. Marcus didn't interrupt. He found out, I continued. And he didn't confront her. No, Marcus said quietly. He waited. And waiting meant planning. Planning meant intent. And intent meant this was never an accident. They needed time, I said. Exactly, Marcus replied. That processing window, it matters. If Caroline doesn't make it before it closes. The sentence didn't need to finish, because I already understood it. The policy wouldn't change. The original beneficiary would stand. Ethan would still be in line. $2.3 million. Secured. At the cost of time. And Caroline had been losing time. Day by day. Dose by dose. Something building inside her. Exactly the way Dr. Lawson described. Not sudden. Not random. Deliberate. I lowered my head slightly, letting the full weight of it settle. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was a calculation. Cold, precise, sustained over weeks, maybe months. Victor, Marcus said carefully, you need to think about what this means. I already am, I replied. Because there was no more space left for doubt. No more room for alternative explanations. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. And for the first time since I walked into that house, I wasn't asking what had happened anymore. I knew. And now, the only thing left to decide was what I was going to do about it. I didn't go back to the waiting room right away. Not after that call. Because once you understand what you're dealing with, you don't react. You plan. Confrontation would have been easy. Walking up to Ethan, demanding answers, forcing a confession in a hallway filled with witnesses. Easy and useless. Because people like that don't confess when they're cornered. They adjust. They deny. They rewrite the story before you can finish asking the question. And I wasn't going to give him that chance. I stepped outside, the air colder than it had any right to be, and pulled out my phone again. This time, I called Angela Pierce. She answered on the first ring. Victor, she said, calm, precise, already focused. What happened? I didn't waste time. I gave her everything. The hospital, Dr. Rebecca Lawson's findings, the toxicity, the supplements, the withdrawals, the insurance policy, the timeline, every detail, exactly as it was. No emotion, no speculation, just facts. There was a pause on her end. Not long, but deliberate. The kind of silence that comes from someone building a case in real time. Victor, she said finally, you're not going to confront them. It wasn't a question. No, I replied. Good, she said. Because the moment you do, they lawyer up. They shut down. And everything we need becomes harder to prove. I leaned against the railing, watching the empty stretch of parking lot, letting her words settle into place. We do this clean. she continued. No noise, no warnings, no mistakes. Clean. That was the only way this worked. What do you need? I asked. Everything that leaves a trail, she said. Financial records, pharmacy purchases, communication logs, anything that shows pattern and intent. Pattern and intent. The same two things that had been forming in my head since the night before. I already have the bank activity, I said. Good, she replied. Now we connected. And that's what we did. Not loudly, not visibly, but precisely. Angela moved through it like someone who had done this before. Because she had. Bank statements were documented, categorized, matched against timelines. Marcus helped pull transaction histories that went deeper than what I could see. Not just what was taken, but when. And how consistently. Then came the pharmacy. 3 separate purchases. Same product. Same location. All paid in cash. The kind of detail someone thinks protects them. But patterns don't disappear just because money changes hands. Security footage confirmed it. Ethan, alone, deliberate, and once, Olivia, in the car, waiting. Olivia. No hesitation, no uncertainty, just repetition. Then the calls. Angela traced them quickly. One stood out immediately. A call was placed to Caroline's estate attorney. Not from her number. From Ethan's. He had posed as someone else, asking about the status of the policy, the timeline, how long before changes were finalized. He hadn't even hidden the number. That detail almost would have been absurd if it wasn't so useful. Angela didn't comment on it. She didn't need to. Because at this point, the picture wasn't forming anymore. It was complete. Every piece aligned. Every action connected. Every decision leading toward the same outcome. Victor, she said finally, her voice steady, controlled. Do not speak to them. Do not warn them. Do not change your behavior. I won't, I replied. Good, she said. Because when this lands, it needs to land all at once. No cracks, no exits. I ended the call and stood there for a moment longer. Not thinking, not questioning, just allowing the stillness to return. Because the fear that had been there before, the uncertainty, it was gone, replaced by something else. Something colder, clearer. This wasn't about finding out what happened anymore. That part was done. Now it was about timing, about control, about making sure that when the truth surfaced, it didn't give them a chance to escape it. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't reacting. I was waiting. They came back on the 5th day, together like nothing had changed. Ethan walked in first, carrying flowers. His posture relaxed, almost rehearsed, like he had decided that calm would be his strategy, that if he looked concerned enough, if he sounded careful enough, the situation might still bend in his favor. Olivia followed just behind him, quieter, watching, calculating. I was already in the hallway when they arrived, standing still, waiting, not for them, for the moment. Dad, Ethan said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. How is she? We've been really worried. I looked at him, held it just long enough for the silence to settle. She's awake, I said, calmly, evenly. She's talking, and she's going to recover. Something moved behind his eyes. Not relief. Not gratitude. Adjustment. A rapid recalculation. The kind you make when the outcome you plan no longer applies. Olivia stepped in quickly, filling the gap. That's amazing news, Victor, she said, her voice soft, controlled. We were so scared. Scared. The word sounded empty, like it had been chosen, not felt. I nodded once, not acknowledging the emotion, just the presence. Then I said it, flat, precise, without emphasis. The police are on their way. For a second, nothing happened. The words didn't land immediately, like their minds rejected them before they could process them. Then Ethan blinked. "What?" he said, the smile gone, replaced by something sharper. "Tighter. Tighter." "Angela Pierce filed everything this morning," I continued. "Bank records, pharmacy purchases, call logs, Dr. Lawson's report. Each piece, placed deliberately, one after the other. No rush, no escalation, just facts." Olivia's composure broke first. Not loudly, not dramatically, but physically. Her shoulders dropped, her posture shifted, as something inside her had disconnected. Ethan stepped forward slightly, his voice lower now, faster. "Dad, just listen, okay? Just—" "No," I said, cutting through it, not raising my voice, just removing the space for him to continue. "There is nothing you can say that changes this." He opened his mouth again, searching, reaching for something that would still work. It didn't come. Because there was nothing left to use, I glanced briefly at the flowers in his hand. "They're nice," I said quietly. "She'll appreciate them from someone else." And then, right on cue, movement at the end of the corridor. 2 officers, steady, purposeful, not rushing, not hesitating, just walking. Ethan saw them first. You could see the moment it registered, the exact second the situation shifted from possibility to reality. His shoulders stiffened, his breath caught slightly, and for the first time since I had walked into that house, he looked surprised. Olivia didn't speak. She didn't move. Her eyes followed the officers as they approached, and whatever calculation had been running behind them finally stopped. "Ethan Hayes," one of the officers said, calm, direct. "We need you to come with us." There was no argument, not at first. Just a brief pause, like he was deciding whether resistance was still an option. It wasn't. "Wait," he said, turning back toward me, his voice breaking slightly for the first time. "Dad, this isn't—" I didn't respond, because there was nothing left between us that required a response. Olivia was next. Her silence held, even as they stepped closer, even as the reality closed in. They were escorted down the hallway together, still holding the flowers, still dressed like visitors, like people who belonged there. Until they didn't. I followed at a distance, not close, not far, just enough to see. Because some moments, you don't interrupt. You witness. The doors opened, the light shifted, and we stepped out into the parking lot. The air felt different, sharper, clearer, like something had finally been released. Ethan tried once more, speaking quickly now, words overlapping, searching for control that was already gone. It didn't matter. The cuffs went on. Clean, efficient, final. Olivia didn't resist. She didn't speak. She just stood there, still, as if the outcome had finally caught up with her. I stopped a few steps away, watching. Not with satisfaction. Not with anger. Something else. Something quieter. Certainty. Because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about winning. It was about ending something that had already gone too far. Marcus appeared beside me. I hadn't even seen him arrive. "When did you get here?" I asked quietly. "Right when it mattered," he said. We stood there together, saying nothing, as the car doors closed, as the engine started, as everything that had been hidden, controlled, and calculated was finally carried away in plain sight. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked after a moment. I thought about it. Not quickly, not automatically. Carefully, like something is finished, I said. And for the first time since this began, that was enough. Caroline came home a few weeks later. Not the same way she had left, not rushed, not surrounded by machines, but walking slowly through the front door, steady, present, alive in a way that felt almost unreal after everything. She paused for a moment in the hallway, looking around, taking in the space like she was seeing it for the first time, or maybe like she was measuring what she had almost lost. Then she turned to me, her eyes sharp again, clear, and unmistakably hers. "You look terrible, Victor," she said quietly. And I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it meant she was back. The trial didn't take long. Angela Pierce made sure of that. Every detail, every record, every decision Ethan and Olivia thought they had hidden was laid out clean, undeniable, impossible to argue against. Attempted murder, conspiracy, financial fraud. The words sounded clinical in the courtroom, but they carried weight. Real weight. The kind that doesn't disappear when the room empties. When the verdict came, it wasn't dramatic. No outbursts, no surprises. Just final. They were sentenced, and for the first time since this began, there were no more questions left unanswered. Only consequences. Caroline sat beside me the entire time, her hand steady in mine, her grip stronger than I expected, as she had already moved past the fear, past the anger, into something else. Acceptance. Not of what they had done, but of what it meant. We didn't say much afterward. We didn't need to. Because some things don't require words. They settle, quietly, into the spaces they changed. That night, we sat across from each other at the table. No interruptions, no noise. Just a normal moment that didn't feel normal at all. And I realized something. Money had been at the center of all of it. Every decision, every step, every calculated move. But in the end, it was the least valuable thing in the room. Because money can tempt people. It can distort judgment. It can even break bonds that once felt unshakable. But it cannot create loyalty. And it will never buy back trust once it's gone. Sometimes, the people closest to you aren't the ones you should trust the most. They're just the ones who know exactly how to hurt you if they choose to. And sometimes, silence isn't weakness. It's the space you give yourself to understand, to prepare, and to respond in a way that leaves no doubt. I came home early that day, and I saw what was hidden in the dark. But more importantly, I made sure it didn't stay there. So let me ask you something. If you were in my place, when the truth finally revealed itself, would you have reacted? Or would you have waited, just long enough, to make sure justice had nowhere left to hide?